Well, as always in a readathon month, it was a busy month, but man, I feel like I got through stuff way easier than normal and had a really successful month. So let's talk about it. Hello and welcome to my channel. In this video, we are going to be doing my monthly wrap up for the month of July. Now, like I said, this was a readathon month with Battle of the Bands, the Canada round, which we so close, this close to winning. Nearly had it, but because it's a readathon month, typically I'm reading all 20 prompts if at all possible, and I did that this time. So I tried to really specifically pick short things, but also really make a dent in books and series that I wanted to get to. And I think this was a really good combo. I had a much bigger list to choose from of like 30 plus things so that I didn't like get locked into anything. And there were a few things I kind of waited and just figured out what I was going to do later. And I really liked the freedom that gave me. And so let's though chat. So first of all, I started off with Elric of Melniboné by Michael Moorcock, which is the I'm going to say first. I think order of these is iffy. And I did this one, and I ended up also reading a couple more. I'm going to grab this here now. But Elric of Melniboné, this saga. I read this whole book. So this also includes Elric of Melniboné, The Fortress of the Pearl, The Sailor on the Seas of Fate, and The Weird of the White Wolf. And I haven't yet made a video talking about these. I think I probably will because I individually enjoyed my time, especially the first couple stories I thought were really interesting. But then as I got into just within reading the first four stories, I kind of realized what I was getting into with Elric, which is where there's really no continuity. There are really big things that conflict in these stories or that just don't make any sense. And apparently you're just kind of supposed to accept that and deal with it. And for those reasons, I don't think I'm ultimately going to be continuing reading more Elric. I think this was something that was really interesting to experience. I think Moorcock's writing is interesting, and I certainly may try more of his stuff additionally. But as for a long series that doesn't really treat like a series, which I know, granted, it wasn't. It was these short stories, many of them published over many different years. And so I totally get that style of thing. And I liked this a lot more than comparable things that I've read that are in this sort of, the sword and sorcery type of feel. I like this a lot more than some of those things I've read. And I think Moorcock as a writer is really strong. But I was really just mixed overall with how I felt about these. But I had a good time. It's one of those things. Glad I finally checked it out, although I don't know if it's ultimately going to be for me. Something else that I've had this copy for quite a long time that was really interesting to try. I did The Body Snatchers by Jack Finney, or also known as The Invasion of the Body Snatchers. And this was just a fascinating reading experience. I did do a review talking about it, but it's one of those things, and there's another book in here we'll talk about in a little bit too, or similar, where I was familiar with the source material but had never read the book. So reading the book was just really interesting. And this is another one. I'm really glad I read this. I had a good time reading it. I don't think it was that good of a book, to be perfectly honest, but you can really see that it's just like what it was doing at the time and the way that it's going and all of the things that were inspired by this. You can see the influence. And so going back and reading that, I think this is one of those books experientially I really had a great time reading. If I'm just looking at this objectively, like it is just okay at best, but it's also one, sometimes those foundational books, I think it's just, I enjoy my time reading them, even if they're not like books that I'm like, oh yeah, I loved this, or I'm going to reread this. Probably not, but if you've not ever read the book, I do recommend it just because it's really interesting just seeing kind of that basis going back to this thing that's influenced so many other things. So I had a fun time with it. It was kind of basic. It had some things that hadn't aged the best either, but it was a fascinating reading experience. From there, I continued on and did another book in the Penric and Desdemona series of novellas by Lois McMaster Bujold. And I've just really generally enjoyed my time reading Bujold's works in general. I've been mostly focusing on Rokosian, which we'll also talk about later. But I've been slowly working my way through the novellas here as well. And so I did Mira's Last Dance, which, let me tell you, was not what I expected it to be. But the base plot of the Penric and Desdemona is Penrick is a young boy who accidentally ends up taking on this demon who was supposed to pass to somebody else when the time came, and has been passed through multiple different hosts over a long period of time, all of them female. And so Penrick being a male is not exactly the right choice. And it's kind of a light, there's a lot of comedy and different things in there in sort of a light style. It's not like outright comedy. I've had a really good time with all of them so far. Some I've liked more than others. But this one is a particular one of the like iterations of Desdemona the demon was a courtesan, and has Penrick pretending to be a courtesan, and it was, I feel like it should have been cringy. It shouldn't have worked, but it just did. And I feel like Bujold just does so well with playing around with gender dynamics and exploring things differently in fantasy and sci-fi, which again we'll talk about shortly. Um, and so yeah, just a really fun time. It was very fun, not what I expected. It was just very really a humorous time. So there's that. Then after that, I did Orca by Stephen Bruce. I did later do Dragon, which is in the next bind up. I don't know. I organized my books in order I actually read them, despite the fact that it makes sense to talk about some of them together. But so I did Orca, which is the second book that's in this bind up, and then I did Dragon, which is the first book that's in this bind up. And also, I've really been enjoying going through these. I started out finally getting to these, something kind of short readathon wise, and there's a couple series I've done this with, but I have just really enjoyed my time with Vlad Tautos. And Orca was another one that was quite different. It was continuing the general storyline that had been happening, where we'd been kind of mixing it up. And this was a frame narrative. I did a short about it too that I thought was funny, because it was there was somebody, Vlad, telling his story to someone who's then telling the story to someone else. So it's kind of story within a story. But there's even just like there's a great joke in there about like, I really am making a lot of this up because I have a terrible time remembering specifics of conversations. So I'm just kind of giving you the gist. And I loved that admission, because I feel like you never get that. You just are expected to believe that people do remember every precise thing. So I thought that was such a fun thing to put in there. And then Dragon was, instead of like keeping up, kind of mixing it up, was going back to just, it was a earlier timeline one. It was very much like the early books, and I was here for it. I was actually really, really ready to go back, and I didn't realize how much I had missed the early books, because I've enjoyed all of these so far. But it was just one of my favorite, if not my favorite, I read so far. I think it was really fun going back. A lot of Loyosh being a smart ass, and all the kind of stuff that's Vlad's dragon familiar. Well, he's a Jereg, which is like a very small dragon kind of thing. But it was a really fun time. It also gave some more background on a lot of the stuff that had been established early on, with like how he knows these people, what these experiences were. And so just a really interesting time to see that too. And it also involves Vlad going off to be in the military for a little while, which, if you know the character at all, is not going to be a natural fit. So I've had an absolute blast with these. I did get the next bind up too, because I certainly will be reading this whole series, and maybe sooner rather than later, because I've just had a great time. Whenever I need like a palate cleanser, or I just want something fun and light, these are really fantastic for that. And yeah, great time with them overall. Then up next, I did the Dreamstone. And I realized I only pulled up the cover for the second one, but I did the Dreamstone. The second one is the Tree of Swords and Jewels, which cool cover. Dreamstone's pretty cool cover as well, but I have this copy that does not have a cover. This is the two books of Arafel Saga, or the Dreaming Tree. It's sometimes called this duology, either way. It is one I was told is not a really good spot to start with CJ Cherry, and I do in retrospect agree with that. I randomly found this one and I was curious, and I had sampled it, and I really liked the writing style. And this is one of those things where this is good. I liked the first book. It's just dealing with these sort of like, it's the like the Fae, and the sort of the thing you see Irish, English, Welsh, and some of those pieces and that type of thing. And it's just that type of story that I don't care for a whole lot. And it was interesting what it was setting up, but ultimately I ended up DNFing book 2 because I just was not really meshing with it. And I think I was trying to force it a bit, because the writing is really good. And I think there's a lot of positives here. It's just not my kind of story. And I was just kind of clashing with a lot of those pieces. I've read other things like that I don't tend to care for a whole lot, and so I'm very interested to still try more CJ Cherry. We'll be doing one of the first Fated Sun book later this year on the sci-fi side. So I think honestly, the fact that I enjoyed as much of this and read as much of this duology as I did, considering it's not my kind of book, tells you something about the writing. So uh, ultimately, that's kind of where I ended up here. It's not one I don't think I'm going to actually end up finishing, but I'm really excited to dig in more with the author. And everyone who's like, yeah, that's not a great one to start with, I wouldn't recommend that. You were right. You were right, because several people did tell me that. Um, so there's that in retrospect. And then another one that was not my thing at all, but I thought was pretty solid, Nettle and Bone by T. Kingfisher. I did talk about this one a bit because this is one of those books where I do absolutely get why this is popular. I think this is pretty well done. It's sort of the, twist fairy tale where it's a darker take, looking at it and kind of exploring what a fairy tale is and what it would actually be like. I just don't really care for the fairy tale stories, whether they're fairy tale ass, twisted fairy tales, whatever. It's just another one of those things. I'm just not a huge fan of that kind of thing. With the fairy tales or the fair folk and all the type of stuff. It's just not for me. And so I thought this was fine. I really didn't have a lot of complaints. It's just not my kind of story either at the same time. Um, Up next, the other one I was teasing a little bit, I Am Legend by Richard Matheson, which was the other sort of like foundational type of sci-fi horror book that I read here, along with Invasion of the Body Snatchers. And this one too, similar to the Body Snatchers, I think this is better, but this is also it's a weird book and it's not what I expected. I did do a review talking about this one recently as well because I knew that it was going to be very different from the adaptation that I had seen. I'd heard about it. I feel like it's pretty common knowledge. It's stuff that's floating around like, hey, in the book, this is actually how it ends. So it was one of those things. And yet, it still was completely not what I expected. It's another one I really recommend checking out. You can see so much of how this also influenced both like zombie and vampire types of stories in huge ways. And it's just the ending of this book is just, I don't know, it hit just absolutely perfect for me. I loved the ending. I thought it was such a strong way to end it. And again, knowing really like it was really obvious where it was going and yet it still hit that hard. So weird book. Definitely some things that were strange, especially with like the main character and the way it was done. There was just so many different things that weren't what I expected, but I really recommend checking this one out again just for the experience. It's not one that I'm going to reread. I don't know. I may or may not check out more stuff from the author, but it's just one of those things that was such an experience. So I really do recommend checking that one out if you've not read it as well. If you're interested at all in kind of sci-fi horror, those types of things, just really cool thing to check. Then we had, oh gosh, we're still so early on the list, I'm realizing, but then we had Ethan of Athos by Los Master Bujal, which is actually, fun fact, I read this accidentally. Seed of Ganda is the one that I should have read next in the like chronological order, but I read this one. No regrets though, because this is possibly one of my favorite of the Vorkosigan books that I've read so far, which is not what I was expecting, because this is sort of a, side book with a different character, and it's just it was so good. And the base plot here is Ethan is a scientist that is in charge of like fertility and like babies and everything on the planet of Athos, which is a male only planet where there's no women, there's no images of women, you can't talk to women, it's completely male only on this planet. And so they run into the problem though, where their most recent batch of eggs are no good. And so he has to go out and find more and get a new contract to have more supplied and go on a planet where they have gasp women. And so it's set up there again. And I like I commented with Penric and Desdemona, Bujal does just an amazing job kind of talking through and exploring gender dynamics in sci-fi and fantasy. You get that a ton in the two early the Cordelia books, Shards of Honor and Barry Art, which also some of the strongest books that I've read. I know the really good Miles books I think are still coming, but so far it's the Cordelia books and then this one that I loved. And I love the way she explores it in these different types of society. And again, it should be cheesy. And it just doesn't really come off that way. There are some like kind of fun, sarcastic bits of wit, and there are things like that. But this never comes off as that like cheesy or over the top thing. And I think any other author writing this would have been an absolute cheese fest and probably would not have been even a quarter as good. But it's just she handles the topics so well, the way she explores it, and especially this one because you're looking at the idea of raising children without mothers and that kind of idea. And it's funny too when Ethan realizes like what the societal implications around like being like a mother or being a woman with a child, where you're just kind of expected to do everything and not be reimbursed for it. He's like appalled at that because like there's so many resources involved. How could you not be reimbursed? And the characters are like, yeah, well, they usually say that's women's work. And so it's just like finding ways to have those discussions, have the kind of the commentary. And Bujold also, her commentary tends to be absolutely just timeless and so fitting because it's not like really hyper specific. It's just general things about humanity. So fantastic book. I think honestly, if you wanted to kind of try a Brokozigan book, I do recommend starting at the beginning with Cordelia books because they're just so good. But if you want to get an idea of just kind of the way that Bujold writes, and you maybe don't want to do the more military focused ones like some of the other ones are, this is a pretty solid one, honestly, to pick up. So it was a fun time. So we already talked about the other Elric books. So then the next thing we had was one of my quickest DNFs ever, which is Held by Ann Michaels. Now, I want to say, me DNFing this again had nothing to do with the book. This is some random. It's a literary fiction. It won a bunch of awards or was like shortlisted. I think it won a bunch of stuff. And my library randomly recommended this to me a long time ago, and I had saved it because it's super short, but it's long enough to count for readathon. I started this, and I'm like, oh no, this is super super literary fiction where the writing just felt very opaque, and I kind of just felt like I had no idea what I was reading. So this was immediate no for me. But if you like super super literary fiction, give it a try maybe because apparently it's very good. It wasn't for me, and I realized that almost immediately, and quit that one very very early. But yeah, sometimes you just know when a book is not for you, and that's what happened there. So then I was working on Nightmareland a bit, and I realized I don't have the image. We could probably put it on in post, but of the bind up that I've been reading. I have an e-arc of because there's a new release that's coming out in hardcover, which I'm very excited for. I still have my paperback copies though. I had to read the first two, Nightmare and Lullaby, which are not long enough to count for readathon, to get to Sleepwalking, which is. So this is one that actually counted, and I've continued on. I'm just about done with book 5 now, into August here, but rereading these, and it's just, man, they're still really good. I remember the first one is I was super reading slumpy, and I needed something really different, and I just Nightfall really just like took my imagination and ran away with it. And coming back and reading this, still just very, very strong. So I'm having a great time with my reread of these books so far. And I'll probably talk more about it once I finish my whole reread and go from there. And but yeah, Nightmareland still super strong. I'm not really much for horror. Typically, this is atmospheric horror, and it's just really good. So if you like horror or you want something totally different that's easy to get into, the books are all pretty short besides book 6, which is only like short novel length even then. Definitely check out. So good stuff for sure. More Elric, and then I have all my books that I read written down. That's what we're looking at. But then Life, the Universe, and Everything, the next book in Hitchhiker's Guide to the Universe, and the one that made me think that maybe I just should stop reading this series. I've been super mixed on Hitchhiker's Guide in general. It's I'd read the first one before, and anytime that I had tried to continue, I just struggled to get into it. And I think I have to be in the exact right mood for Douglas Adams' level of zaniness. It's just a bit much for me at points. It's similar, like I have to be in the mood to read like Discworld because Pratchett's kind of zany, but Adams is kind of on another level with the zaniness, I feel like. And it just doesn't always hit for me. This one, though, I just straight up did not like. I didn't care for this at all. I didn't have a good time reading it. And I have heard that apparently this is like the worst one, and a lot of people say it gets better. So maybe at some point I'll give it another try, but it certainly won't be soon. I've not really had a very good time with these books. I know they're really beloved. It's just not for me ultimately. And if it's a book that I have to be in the exact right headspace for, and then it still might not work for me, it's just not something I'm gonna focus on prioritizing. So it kind of just is what it is. I get it why I'm like I love the movie so much, the U.S. movie. I've seen one of the British adaptations of the show, which was also pretty good. So I love that, and I think it worked. And they took a lot of elements from the first like several books, and I think that also helped. But yeah, books so much just not working the best for me. Then we did something very different, which was The Art Thief by Michael Finkel, and this is like a, I guess, true crime type of thing. And I remember hearing many years ago. This was super popular when it came out. It was huge. It was everywhere. And wow, that's just pretty good. I don't really get the like love and accolades because this is a pretty basic, just sort of telling the story. It wasn't really done in like any way to like up drama. It wasn't really done in like a frame narrative way where we're telling the story as if it's happening. It was just like, hey, here's what happened. It was interesting, but yeah, I mean, interesting, but I really didn't have a whole lot to say about it. I'm not going to do a review or anything because I don't know what I would do more than like, this was interesting. But basically, I mean, it amounts to this guy sort of just went into museums and they didn't really have security, so he just took things for a long time. And that's pretty much it. There's not like a whole lot to it. He wasn't doing all these super secret agenty things or anything. He's just like, yeah, go to this museum and they don't really have security, so just take the stuff. And so interesting story, but I feel like reading an in-depth article probably could get you about the same experience as reading the book, to be honest. So, read it if you're interested. It's pretty short, but you could probably read the Wikipedia page and get about the same thing, to be honest. Just saying. So there's that one. One, though, that was a big surprise was Howl's Moving Castle by Dana Wynne Jones. I had never actually read anything from this author. Very beloved, mostly kind of wrote like younger children's type things. And this one, I just was delighted by. I was having such a good time with the beginning. I do feel like it started to drag for me a little bit because it just it added some additional elements that I don't know how I felt about it. It was kind of different and just kind of did more. I have since read that apparently it's this author is like really strong start, kind of drags a little bit, but it has enough stuff going on to pull you through. But just sort of the idea here, where it's called Howl's Moving Castle, but the main character is this girl who just feels like she's destined to go nowhere in life, and she ends up being cursed by a witch to be an old woman, and kind of just ends up really embracing being an old woman and like browbeating Howl, who's this young wizard, and just kind of going to the persona. And it was fun. It was cute. It was really well done. And so I'm curious to try more from the author because this was just a big surprise. It was one I'm like, I don't really expect to like this that much. It's younger reading, but I really did have fun with it. So if you've never read it and want to try out Diana Wynne Jones or just kind of like a fun, easy reading type of story, this was pretty good. I enjoyed this quite a lot. So that was a fun time for sure. And then up next, what have we not talked about here? I've gone a little bit out of order, which this is why. I'm like, why am I not doing this in order? Because then I look at my list and I don't know where I am. But next up, we'll talk about The Carpet People by Terry Pratchett. So this is the like pre-Discworld type of thing that he, wrote when he was like a teenager. And this was solid, but also I think it shows kind of similar to the early Discworld novels. This just doesn't have the polish and the strengths of a lot of the later books where he kind of really just got into the groove, figured out what he was doing. Because Color of Magic was straight up bad to me, and I think it got better from there, but I wrote off Discworld for years because I disliked Color of Magic so much and just didn't care for it. And then I went back later, I read Guards. I kind of saw more what he was going for, but still thought it had issues. And I really think once you start getting deeper in, the books improve dramatically. And so for me, this was just like going back to the stuff before it was as good. It's pretty similar to the type of stuff, the themes that you'll see in Discworld. I think this is one that if you're like the die-hard Pratchett fan, you've read all of Discworld, and you just want more, check it out for sure. If you haven't already, you probably have if you're that fan. If you're a more casual fan, you're not really missing a whole lot of this. I did end up listening to a version that was narrated by David Tennant, though, so that was kind of fun, and honestly is what made me decide to pop this one on, just because that seemed like that would be a fun narration, because it's David Tennant. I love him. It's appropriate because I'm wearing a Doctor Who shirt today. But yeah, so I thought that was fun, and this was fine. I like this just fine. It's kind of like early Discworld, where it's good, but it's not great, and you're not getting anything super different or special from it. Otherwise, we then had one that was a surprise, Automatic Noodle by Annalee Newitz. Now, I didn't really know anything about this one. I ended up just needing to fill a prompt, and I couldn't figure out what to do, and this is one that I saw somebody else on Team Rock had picked. And this is about these machines, basically, that the restaurant they work at, the owner just like goes MIA, and they're trying to keep it together and run their own restaurant and start their own restaurant and figure it out. And it's a novella. It's fairly short, but it does quite a lot, I feel like, in that time, and establishes sort of the history of what's happened. This is a sort of post-apocalyptic world in some ways. It's not like actual apocalypse, but it's just like there's been massive war, and California is now separate from the United States, and there's all of this different talk of the creation of different, machines and androids and things like that too. And so it does a lot of kind of looking at the commentary and also using it to show the story that's involving these robots, but showing just the way that things in our history have worked with discrimination and treating people like not real people and kind of stuff like that too. So I thought it was really, really solid. And then really the only complaint is it just sort of ends. Like we just sort of were like, all right, we're done now because this is a novella. And it's I don't know. It's something too that it's meant to be short, and I think there's a lot packed into it. But the ending just didn't seem like it wrapped up particularly well. I don't know if there's planned to be more, and maybe that's why. But it just seemed like it sort of abruptly ended. So definitely the one. I think this was really well done. I'd never heard of this author. I'd never heard of this book prior to this, but definitely will be checking out more because I was really impressed with just a lot of what this was doing. And it was just kind of it's kind of your cozy but really has more depth to it type of story as well. So I think it worked out really, really well. We then had, which I will be doing a review, I haven't quite yet, but The Priestess of the White by Trudy Canavan, which was the biggest disappointment I had this month for sure. This was our backlist book club pick, and I was really, really interested to try this because on paper, this sounded like it was going to be having a lot of the things that were for me. It is a story where like the gods are very much real, and it's called Age of the Five because like there was some big war between the gods, and these are the five that survived, and like they're present, very much real gods who can bestow real power. And I really like the kind of world building you can get with that type of thing. But overall, the story just it felt like it was it's one of those books where it's written very much in like a YA fashion where it's kind of overly simplistic. We don't delve into stuff too much, but it has some like adult content in so that we can say like, oh, this is actually targeted at adults, even though it's very clearly a YA novel. And those types of books I feel like are such a big clash for me because especially here there was the world building that was presented was really interesting, but then we just don't delve a whole lot into it. And it felt like to me all of the stuff I'm interested in, like, yes, let's get more of this world, let's get more of this political situation, let's get more of how the different religions and cultures work. And it's no, we're just kind of really moving on, skipping past all of that stuff just to move the plot along. But even then, like plot resolutions just sort of happen, and I just didn't feel like any of the characters really earned anything. They just were like, you have this now, or this is what's happened now. And even like the main character, you skip all of the coming of age elements, and you're just like, here's they were a kid, now they're an adult with all of this power and responsibility. I'm just like, none of that felt earned though. And then the decisions that people make throughout just never really make any sense. And so I was very disappointed in this. I still will definitely be trying other Trudy Canavan. I looked at a bunch of reviews for this, and so many people actually were like, oh my gosh, I loved her first trilogy. What is this? This is nowhere near as good. So I'm hoping that's the case for me, that I end up enjoying her other stuff a lot more because I'm still interested to try the author. But yeah, this was a pretty big miss for me. I was very, very disappointed with, unfortunately. Yeah, so that wasn't great. Then we have 2001: A Space Odyssey, which was not originally one of my planned things, but again, I ended up doing for a prompt. And this was, again, I guess not what I expected. I still want to. I've never actually seen the movie either. I do love Kubrick, and this is the book and the movie were written like at the same base time between Arthur C. Clarke and Kubrick. Stanley Kubrick, and they worked on them together. I'm very curious because like I'm very familiar with like the movie, all of the famous clips and pieces of it, but I never actually seen it, and I had never read the book either. And the book was very different. It's one of those things where like I feel like I've read that now. That is a thing that I've done, but nothing really super stood out to me. I think there were some very interesting elements, but it just sort of ends on a very broad note, and you don't really get a whole lot. And it's kind of one of those things. I feel like you get that sometimes with sci-fi movies too, where like, and then all of this stuff is super open-ended. And so it was interesting. I enjoyed my time with this one, similar to the other kind of foundational well-known sci-fi things that I read. in the month of July, but is not something that really stuck with me a whole heck of a lot either. But I am curious if I do end up watching the movie, maybe I'll do something kind of comparing, contrasting. But I would be interested to see that at this point as well. Now, that is all. I feel like we've been going for quite some time, but that is all that I read in the month of July. So 20 things finished, plus there was a DNF in there. I think I had another DNF that maybe I just didn't write down actually because I didn't get very far, but that's it for July. So let me know your thoughts on any of the stuff that I talked about. If you made it all the way through, this is definitely a longer wrap up for sure. But I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on any of these books or what you read, if you did readathon or not, and what you read in the month of July as well. So definitely let me know in the comments. Make sure to give the video a like if you enjoyed it. Check the links in the description as always for the Patreon if you want to support what I do, as well as the Wizard of the Enclave's Discord if you want to chat books, whether any of these books, other books, really anything at all. It's a lot of fun. We'd love to have you. And of course, if you enjoy my content, make sure to subscribe.